Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in part 7 of What If Reds and Blues goes to Remnant. Link down description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 13, The Torchwick Crisis Part 3. Remnant, Continent of Sanus, Mountain Glen. POV. Ruby Rose. Premise. The D train heading for the Bronx is leaving soon, and both the Blood Gulch crew and Team RWBY are desperate to board it. Gah! Ruby cries, she is thrown across the floor of the cavern by Torchwick. Wow! The criminal chuckled, you are much more manageable without that oversized gardening tool of yours. Ruby got up and charged at Torchwick. But he simply just steps aside, and watches her tumble on the floor. Oh man! Torchwick laughed, you know Perry, I did need this. Perry gave him a simple thumbs up in response. Torchwick then walked up to Ruby and pointed his cane at her. But seriously Red, how did you find this place? He asked her. Ruby just growled at him, and used her semblance to run away. Whoa! Torchwick muttered, before twirling his cane in the air and firing a hook at her hood, catching her. Ruby then found herself back in his grasp. I see you've got some tricks up your sleeve. Torchwick said to her, let me make this clear, we're not through here yet. Suddenly, the two heard a massive explosion in the distance. Oh, what the? Perry, if you and the boys could take care of that. Torchwick asked his associate, kinda in the middle of something. Perry simply nodded at him before going off with several of his fellow WF soldiers to investigate the situation. That was when another explosion was heard. What is going on here? Torchwick shouted. A third explosion then went off, and Torchwick noticed several white-fanged soldiers running around the corner of some abandoned buildings. Turns out, they were being chased by Team RWBY, and the Reds and Blues. Ruby took advantage of this and jumped onto Torchwick's soldiers and pulled his hat over his eyes before running off back to her friends. Torchwick managed to fix his hat, somebody kill her. The WF soldiers at his side, along with himself proceeded to open fire on Ruby. But she dodged every shot, angering Torchwick even more. He then turned to one of his men, attach this cart and spread the word, we're starting the train. But we're not finished, the soldier pleaded. Torchwick proceeded to pin the soldier against the wall with his cane, do it or you're finished. Meanwhile, Ruby ran up to a group of WF soldiers that were closing in on her. But they were flown off their feet by an explosion caused by her friends. Ruby! Caboose shouted, as she hugged him. Are you okay? Weiss asked her. I'm fine, Ruby shouted, but listen. Torchwick's got all kinds of weapons and robots down there. What? Blake cried, as she handed Ruby her scythe. Androids, mechs, they're all loaded up on the train cars. That's ridiculous. Simmons replied, these tunnels are sealed, the tracks lead to a dead end. Suddenly, Torchwick's voice was heard over a loudspeaker, get to your places, we are leaving now. A nearby train carrying several train cars then started to move on the nearby tracks, heading into one of the caves. Well, it sounds like they're going somewhere. Tucker muttered. We need backup. Ruby shouted, where's everyone else? JNPR, Doc, Locus, Donut, Kai, and Lopez all stayed behind. Wash replied. So what do we do? Weiss asked. Ruby deployed her scythe, we're stopping that train. Hell yeah, Sarge muttered, as he cocked his shotgun. POV change. WF soldier. A lone WF soldier stood in the rear train car, when he heard a noise coming from outside of the train car. He opened the side door only to notice Griff hanging from the side. Hey buddy. Griff said to him, is this the D train heading to the Bronx? Cause me and my friends are looking for the A train going into Brooklyn. Why you? The soldier shouted, only for Griff to grab him by the collar, threw him out of the train car. Griff then climbed back onto the top of the caboose, where everyone else was. Nah, this is the F train heading for Staten Island, he jokingly said. Funny. Simmons muttered, I could have just taken the ferry. Come on, let's keep moving. Guys. Weiss muttered. Yeah, Tucker replied. What's that? She asked them while looking into a hatch, inside was some sort of device. That, Simmons said to her, appears to be a bomb. A what? Carolina shouted, how much time do we have? We got baddies. Ruby shouted, as she pointed at a train car that was ahead of them. WF soldiers all pouring out in an attempt to stop them. Simmons then looked at the bomb, which started to flash red. This is one of those moments where I actually don't like the color red. Sarge muttered. No time, no time, Simmons cried as he waved his hands in the air. Everyone, get to the next car. Wash shouted, Blake, detach the caboose, it'll kill us all. Hey, Caboose yelled at him. Everyone jumped onto the next train car. Blake then turned around and was about to detach the caboose, only to see it detach itself. Blake muttered, it decoupled itself. What? Sarge shouted. I guess Torchwick really doesn't want us on this train. Tucker quipped. The caboose slowed down a bit before exploding into pieces. That's not good, Wash muttered. Neither is this. RWBY shouted while looking into the current train car's hatch. Sarge ran over to her and looked inside. Another bomb. Sarge cried. Griff looked around before running over to the next train car, and opened its hatch. They all have bombs. He shouted to his friends. The train car the rest of the group were on started to detach, forcing them all to jump onto the one Griff was standing on. This doesn't make any sense. Wash cried. Meanwhile, the WF soldiers were still closing in on the group. Get the humans. One of them shouted at them. The next detached train car proceeded to explode, only this time it created a hole in the cavern, allowing multiple forms of Grimm to emerge from the wreckage. They all growled before proceeding to follow the train. Oh dear. Griff muttered, he's leading Grimm into the city. What? Carolina cried. It's the cars. Griff explained, they detach and explode, creating openings for the Grimm. That's insane. Blake shouted. Just then, another car detached itself. We have to hurry. Sarge announced. Griff, Simmons, Tucker, go with Blake, Weiss, and Yang and disarm the bombs. What about you guys? Simmons asked. We're gonna stop this train. Sarge replied. That's what I said earlier, Sarge. RWBY muttered. Pav change, the Prowler. On the surface, the rest of the team got a message from the Sarge. Torchwick's gonna lead Grimm into Vale. You guys have to get all the help we can get. Sarge shouted through the comms. Come on. Locus shouted, let's move. Where are we going to get help? Kai questioned. Beacon. Locus replied, it's the closest place with both Huntsman and the Atlas military. Then let's get some help. John muttered. Everyone boarded the Prowler before it took off in the direction of Vale and Beacon Academy. Pav change. WF train. As the train continued toward its destination, several members of the White Fang started to take control of their Atlesian paladins. With one jumping onto the top of the train's cars, and started to charge at the group. Heads up. RWBY shouted. Sarge looked at Sway before getting an idea. He picked up the corgis and threw him up in the air. Pulling out his shotgun, Sarge fired one round at the dog, sending him flying into one of the two paladins, knocking off its feet and off the train. Sway then got up and looked at the second paladin, which was quickly knocked off the train by Carolina. Wash took out several WF soldiers with his battle rifle, while Caboose was mowing them as if he was Rambo. Thanks to Freckles. Targets eliminated. Targets eliminated, said Freckles as each soldier was gunned down. Thanks Freckles. Caboose said to his rifle. Did your rifles just talk? RWBY asked him. Yep. Caboose replied, his name is Freckles. I want one now, RWBY mentally said to herself. Pav. Train car. While RWBY, Sarge, Sway, and the freelancers were giving the soldiers and paladins hell. The rest of the group entered one of the lower train cars. I guess this is what we trained for. Yang said to her teammates. Hey, we got this. Tucker assured. Weiss took out an ammo cartridge filled with dust and gave it to Blake. Here, this should help you, she said to her, as Blake took the cartridge and slid the mag into her weapon. Come on. Tucker spoke up. Let's move, the sooner we get this train to stop. The sooner this will all be over. The group ran towards the end of the train car, until a figure stopped them in the middle of their tracks. That figure turned out to be Neo. Oh great. Simmons groaned. I forgot about Neo. Griff added. Griff and I got this one. Yang muttered, you guys go on ahead. Wait, what? Griff gulped, as the others ran up to Neo. Griff proceeded to give them covering fire so Neo couldn't attack them. She then set her sights on both him and Yang, once others escaped. Yang walked up to Neo and gave her a cold hard stare, while Neo simply put a sinister smile on her face. Yang then raised her arm ready to punch the smaller girl. Yang, wait! Griff shouted. Yang swung at Neo, but upon impact, all she felt was pain. She then dashed forward, unleashing a flurry of several punches, resetting each time instead of redirecting her blows, as Neo simply dodged each attack, moving her body swiftly in order to avoid them in a very laid-back, but extremely effective style. With every unsuccessful punch, elbow, and kick, Yang continued moving forward as her last 3 blows brought her to a knee, where she attempted a roundhouse kick, allowing Neo to deliver a spinning hook kick, knocking Yang to the ground, the former's guard completely open on the left side. Neo was about to deliver a second blow until Griff fired a grenade from the Griff shot, causing her to stumble slightly. She then dashed forward at him, but was slashed across the chest by his sword, thus blowing off a portion of her aura. Griff then took out his pistol and fired several rounds at her, which were all blocked by her umbrella. Yang then got up and charged at Neo, but she countered through a pull in redirection of force technique, pulling Yang's arm in with her own left arm, and performing a well-executed axe kick to hit Yang on the chin, before kicking Yang in the stomach with a perfect side kick. Neo then pushed Yang back via her umbrella, now on the offensive, as Yang tries to counter her movements with Ember Celica. Neo is able to effortlessly push Yang back against a wall, until Griff fired at her feet with his battle rifle. Neo, however, backflipped effortlessly, and she landed perfectly on a metal container, before sitting, awaiting both Griff and Yang's next attack. POV change. Next train car. In the following train car, Weiss, Simmons, Blake, and Tucker proceeded to make their way towards the engine when they heard the sound of revving coming in their direction. The revving was coming from a chainsaw being carried by a WF lieutenant. "You guys go on ahead," Simmons said to both Tucker and Blake, "we got this guy." Both simply nodded as they ran up to the lieutenant. The Faunus swung the weapon over his head. Weiss backflipped away from it, but both Blake and Tucker quickly deflected his attack anyway before swiftly departing. Weiss flips forward, slashing the lieutenant with Mertenaster, and the two fight, each parrying the other's attacks successfully before Weiss flips the lieutenant over, and Simmons punches him in the gut. Both smiled at Blake and Tucker, who left the carriage as the lieutenant stood back up. "Finally, I get to kill a Schnee," he said as he readied his weapon. Weiss held Mertenaster up in defense. The lieutenant ran towards Weiss as she raised her weapon defensively before using Mertenaster to draw a pale blue circle in the air, forming a force field. Cyan shockwaves radiated from the center of the force field as the lieutenant tried, in vain, to saw through it. Simmons then jumped up and opened fire on him, but the soldier simply deflected all the bullets with his weapon. Weiss then knocked him back with a slash from her weapon. The lieutenant attempted another overhead swipe, but Weiss pointed her weapon downwards and let the chainsaw simply run down the side of it, creating sparks but missing her completely. She then spins and slashes him again, knocking him back. She flipped gracefully over him, slashing at his head and landing on the other side of him. Simmons then swung at the lieutenant but missed, and was hit in the head by the brute's chainsaw. However, it did no damage, as Simmons' armor was strong. Simmons then kicked him in the leg, knocking him to the ground. Rising from the ground, the lieutenant slashed at Weiss, but she ducked out of the way. After attempting another overhead slash, which she dodged again, the lieutenant managed to briefly knock her back after the two weapons clashed. However, his subsequent kick towards her meets only a pile of boxes, as she leaps onto the ceiling. She spiraled downward with her weapon outstretched, but he stepped out of the way. She lands, before getting up, deflecting one of his attacks, performing a backflip and countering with a stab of her own, which sended him flying backwards. As he got back on his feet, Weiss held Mertenaster in front of her and concentrated, mixing yellow dust with a glyph to create a haste glyph beneath herself. Utilizing her speed power-up, Weiss charges forward and creates a series of glyphs that surround the lieutenant. She leapt and began ricocheting off each of the glyphs, slashing at him extremely quickly each time she passed him, knocking him to the ground. Creating another glyph, Weiss attempts to stab him where he lies, but the lieutenant rolls backwards, preventing her from doing so. She jumps in the air in order to attack him again, but the lieutenant takes notice of this. "Come here, princess," He snarls before grabbing her face before brutally raising her above his head and throwing her into Simmons, knocking them to the ground. Weiss was the first to get up. She looked over at Simmons, who slowly got up. He was facing the other direction as the WF soldier spoke to them. "Hey, you damn humans are always the same. You think us faunus are all freaks," he said to them. "No, Simmons, I don't. You wanna know why? PMF, why?" He practically snarled at him. Simmons took his helmet off and dropped it on the ground. He then turned around to reveal his face. Both the soldier and Weiss stepped back slightly to see what they were looking at. Simmons had fair skin, and maroon hair, and his left eye was green. His other eye was glowing red. The entire upper portion of his face was metal, stopping just above his mouth. A small portion of his lower neck was also metal, along with a small strip of metal just above his right eyebrow. "'Cause where I come from. I'm a freak." Simmons then charged at the WF soldier and somehow managed to knock the chainsaw out of his hands. He then punched him straight in the jaw before being punched himself. Simmons was knocked back to Weiss's position. "Let me make this clear," the soldier growled, "you won't make it off this train alive." "And neither will you," Simmons replied. Suddenly, the WF soldier heard something beeping on his shoulder. He looked and found a blue orb stuck to him. The orb lit up as if it were on fire. The soldier started to panic, as he realized that it was a grenade of some kind. Simmons then jumped in front of Weiss as the grenade exploded, killing the lieutenant. Pav change, Blake and Tucker. Blake and Tucker ran into the next train car, only to run into a familiar face. "Hello, kitty cat, Mr. Tucker." Torchwick replied casually, "You miss me? You know, we really gotta stop meeting like this. People are gonna talk." Blake just growled and charged at him. She fainted and used her semblance combined with dust to create a fiery shadow of herself. Roman striked it and it exploded, propelling him into the air. Blake jumped up and delivered some mid-air strikes to knock him down, then landed in a fighting stance. Roman fired a blast from his weapon, and Blake used dust to create a stone shadow of herself to take the blow. She leapt overhead and prepared to strike, only to faint again and create another shadow of herself with her semblance. Tucker then drew his word and charged at Torchwick. The criminal blocked a flurry of attacks from Tucker and tried to strike her with an overhead blow, but he dodged it. Blake then trapped Torchwick's weapon within ice, before sending a shockwave that broke the ice and knocked Torchwick to the ground. As he tried to get up, Tucker put his foot on him and pointed his pistol at his head. Blake simply pointed her blade at his neck. Roman chuckled nervously before speaking, "Why are we fighting? I saw you at the rally, we're on the same side and you know it." "Shut up." Tucker barked at him, "You've lost Torchwick. You won't be hurting Ruby or her friends ever again. I must say, I never thought you would be this successful." Torchwick said to Tucker, "You red and blue bastards are more creative than I thought you were. One of my partners are going to have a field day. We already stopped her little mission on CCT." Tucker replied, "So don't bother thinking you're going to win. Man, you are crazy, my friend." Torchwick chuckled, "Am I right, Blake?" Blake simply growled at him. "Oh, still feisty." Torchwick quipped, "Sue, what are we gonna do now? You think a little bow on top is gonna make people forget who you were? What you've done?" Blake just growled again at him along with Tucker. "Come on, Tucker." Torchwick chuckled, "This world may seem all happy and go lucky. But you and both know the truth. This world is doomed, and I intend to save it." Tucker just stared at him. "So what's it gonna be, Blake?" Torchwick asked the faunus. Blake thought for a moment before sheathing her weapon. She then kicked Torchwick in the face, knocking him out. Tucker was about to say something until Simmons and Weiss entered the train car. "Are you guys okay?" Tucker asked them. "We are. But that other guy isn't," Weiss replied. "Did you know Simmons is a cyborg?" "Yeah, we did." Tucker answered her. "Let's get back on top." Pav change, Griff and Yang. Griff fired several grenades at Neo, who got up from her seat and deflected them all with her umbrella. She then slashed at Griff, who drew his sword and blocked several of her attacks before somehow kicking him in the balls. "Not again." Griff groaned before he was knocked to the ground by Neo. Yang then unleashed another attack. Neo countered, and began kicking Yang back. Yang then unleashed another blast from gauntlets, which Neo blocked. The two spar briefly, hand to hand, before Yang grabs Neo's foot, and pulls her closer to throw her, only for Neo to perfectly counter, before grappling Yang and using her momentum to throw her into Griff, knocking him down again, and rendering Yang unconscious. Griff then looked up to see Neo draw a hidden blade within her umbrella. She walked up to Yang's body, ready to make the final move. "Yang, no!" Griff shouted. Neo was about to make her move when suddenly, a red portal opened up on the ceiling. A figure emerged from it and drew a long red sword. It was Raven. She charged at Neo and slashed at her, but was blocked by her umbrella. Neo, realizing that she was outmatched by Raven, and Griff, who was getting up, disappeared in a flash. Griff got up and got a good look at his and Yang's rescuer. "You." "So," Raven muttered, "I was right. You do know Yang." Griff drew his pistol. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill right here and now." "Right in front of a child," Raven quipped. "That's cold." "You left her, Raven." Griff growled. "She had no mother, until summer came and went." "You've been doing some research," Raven muttered. "Impressive." Raven then summoned a portal and began to walk away. "I know what it's like to leave Raven." Griff continued. "I left my family to join the army. Then, I left my friends cause I couldn't cope with reality. But I overcame that, after realizing that they needed me. Like how Yang needed you." Raven stopped moving, but still looked away. "This is your chance to undo everything. Just like I had my chance," Griff said to her. Raven looked at him. "Just watch over Yang for me. Will you?" She then entered the portal before it disappeared. Yang then got up, catching Griff's attention. "Yang," he said to her, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," Yang replied. "Let's get out of here." "Right." POV change. Train car roof. RWBY, Caboose, Sarge, and the ex-freelancers all made it to the front of the train. Upon arriving, the rest of their friends emerged from the top hatch of the train car. "Okay, the bombs are defused," Griff panted. "Yeah, but we got another problem," Wash shouted, as he pointed in towards the front of the train. They were approaching where the tunnel was sealed off. "What do we do?" Blake questioned. RWBY and Weiss looked at one another and smiled. The Ice Queen summoned a thick sheet of ice to cover the entire group. Once inside, they all braced themselves for the impending crash. POV change. RWBY rose. RWBY slowly opened her eyes. From her perspective, she was lying on her back. Upon sitting up, she took notice of all her friends. They were also no longer underground. Instead, they were back in Vale. A large hole in the middle of the road. "Is everyone okay?" Wash asked. "We're fine," Sarge replied. "What the hell?" Griff muttered. "We're back in Vale." Suddenly, the ground started to shake until a King Taijutsu emerged from the hole along with numerous other forms of Grim. Civilians all started to panic and run from the chaos, as more Grim emerged from the hole. The Reds and Blues and Team RWBY then readied their weapons, realizing the fight wasn't over yet. Chapter 14. The Torchwick Crisis Part 4. Remnant, Kingdom of Vale, Beacon Academy. POV. Professor Ozpin. Premise. Stop the breach, learn the truth. Ozpin, Glinda and Ironwood all walked toward the Bullhead dock at Beacon. The three of them conversing on the same topic that has plagued them for days. "Any word from Kiro yet?" Ironwood asked. "No, he hasn't contacted us since he found out about the Reds and Blues." Ozpin replied. "I am rather worried. Kiro can handle himself." Glinda added, "But I must admit, it is quite annoying to see him not contact us." Both Ozpin and Glinda then noticed that Ironwood was no longer paying any attention to them. Instead, he was gazing up at the sky. "James, what's wrong?" Glinda asked him. "What is that?" The general muttered. The two then looked up to see some object flying towards Beacon. "Is that a bullhead?" Glinda questioned. "No," Ironwood replied, "it's too sleek to be a bullhead." The aircraft hovered over the large concrete pad near the end of the walk leading up to Beacon before deploying its landing gear and touched the ground. The three adults walked up to it, with Glinda already having her riding crop in her hand. As they approached the ship, the boarding ramp lowered, and out stepped John. Which surprised all of them. "Mr. Ark," Glinda muttered. John didn't say anything, and instead went OT the nearest trash can, and started to heave due to motion sickness. Nora then wobbled down the ramp as well, just not as sick as her leader was. "That was awesome," she muttered, as Pyrrha and Ren then walked down the ramp. "John, are you okay?" Pyrrha asked her partner. "Yeah," John groaned, "better now." "Children," Glinda barked at them, "What is going on? Where'd you find this bullhead? Team RWBY is in trouble." Ren replied, "Yeah." Nora continued, "Torchwick's leading Grimm into Vale via the old train system from Mountain Glen." "What?" Glinda shouted. "Who told you this?" Ironwood asked them. Ahem. The trio looked up at the top of the ramp to see 3 soldiers standing there. The first one being pink, the second one purple, and the last one yellow. Pav change. Cinder fall. Cinder and her associates watched as a mysterious bullhead took off from the bullhead docks and headed for Vale. They were all in their Mistral uniforms. A loud siren could be heard coming from Vale. Emerald was the first to speak. "You don't think?" "Sure looks like it," Mercury said to her. "But that's still days away," Emerald shouted. Mercury then looked at Cinder. "So, what do we do?" Cinder didn't respond, and simply just narrowed her eyes, as she watched the unknown bullhead fly towards Vale. Pav change. City of Vale. Team RWBY, the Reds, and the Blues all stood in the middle of Vale's commercial district, surrounded by Grimm. The creature kept pouring out of the massive hole in the middle of the road. "This is definitely not the reunion I was hoping for, guys," Griff muttered, with his sword already out. "Yeah, no shit," Simmons replied. "I mean, I could use the exercise," Tucker quipped. "Really?" Carolina said to him. "Yeah, you're right," Tucker sighed. "RWBY. Let's fight," RWBY shouted. The Grimm horde roared before charging at the group. RWBY then jumped up in the air before slamming Crescent Rose into the ground, and used it to spin in a circle, kicking the creatures. She then took out her pistol and fired a large bolt that decimated them all. Tucker drew his sword and began slashing at several creeps, flipping in the air while pulling out his DMR, and mowed down 2 Ursas. Yang then looked at Griff, who was slashing at several Grimm with his sword before pulling out the Griff shot and firing on several Beowulfs. He then felt something push on his shoulders before it suddenly disappeared. Turns out it was Yang. She jumped in the air and fired several shots at a hoarder of Grimm. Until 3 Nevermores grab her, and throw her to the ground. Blake on the other hand, slashes at several Beowulfs before firing on any Grimm that crossed her path. Simmons managed to knock an Ursa down and fired a full SMG case into it, while Sarge blew the heads off of several Deathstalkers. Weiss proceeded to slash and stab several Grimm before summoning a glyph to conjure an ice blade. Carolina ran up to an Uraz and somehow managed to put a grenade in its mouth. Caboose was mowing down Grimm with freckles. Yang proceeded to throw a car at several Grimm, crushing them to oblivion when a King Taijutsu appeared. The snake Grimm was about to attack here when it noticed something in the sky. Nora flew through the air before slamming Maghild into the snake Grimm's head, killing it. She then landed on the ground, with teammates, Doc, Donut, and Locust joining them. "Let's move," Hira shouted before charging into battle along with the rest of her team. Nora proceeded to knock a Grimm away as if it were a golf club. Ren jumped in the air, and slashed at several Grimm before mowing more down with his weapons. Donut took out his grenade launcher and basically gave the Grimm death from above. Locust was much more quiet. He snuck through the battlefield with his cloaking tech and took out Grimm that were either confused or separated from the rest of the pack. Doc was much more violent. He fired his rocket launcher over and over again as if there was an infinite amount of ammo in it. Mawahahaha. Yes. Taste oblivion. O'Malley laughed. "Man, so much aggression." Doc muttered casually, "We really need to have a therapy session after this is all over." "Shut up." O'Malley hissed, "I wish to see what John is going to do." Doc and his alter ego took notice of John looking up at a giant Ursa. Something that Pyrrha also noticed after taking down several Grimm. John suddenly proceeded to slash furiously at the creature until the Ursa simply fell on its back. Pyrrha smiled at John's small victory, as did Doc. O'Malley had a different comment. "You got lucky, numbnuts," O'Malley shouted. "Really, dude?" Doc groaned. "What? I was being honest," O'Malley replied. Just then, 2 guys entered the battle. It was the same boys from several nights ago, Sun and Neptune. "Nobody move," Sun shouted as he held up a badge, "Junior detectives. We have badges so you know it's official," Neptune added, before the 2 fist pumped. The Reds and Blues all stare at them in confusion. "Where the hell did you find these 2? Tucker asked Blake. "It's complicated," Blake replied. Suddenly, both Sun and Neptune were immediately upstaged by the sudden appearance of an Atlas airship under the command of James Ironwood, causing Sun to drop his badge in awe. As Team RWBY looked up in the sky, an Ursa takes the opportunity to attack RWBY from behind. However, it was gunned down by a dropship's machine gun. As smaller Atlesian dropships deployed Atlesian knights, they started gunning down the Grimm. Two of the knights are stampeded on by a Borbatusk, but a separate group of 3 knights fire on an Ursa and another Ursa has fallen from a knight's punch. Boo! Griff hissed, "Stupid Atlas. Get out of here," Sarge added. "Why do you hate Atlas so much?" Weiss asked them. "They are terrible." Simmons replied, "Have you seen how they build their robots?" "Yes, I have." Lopez replied from the Prowler, "They are not real robots. All other robots are inferior to Lopez the Heavy." Agent Washington drew several combat knives before throwing them in at numerous Grimm. He then slides under a Beowulf's legs before getting up and shooting it in the back. It was then that Wash took notice of 3 individuals standing nearby. The first was a girl with black hair and amber eyes in a red dress. The second was a boy with silver hair and gray eyes wearing a black and silver shirt with black pants. While the third was a girl with green hair and red eyes. "Mind if we have some fun?" Cinder asked Wash. Wash just looked at her before answering, "Fine by me," he said in a suspicious tone before running off towards another part of the battle. Cinder motioned for her associates to make their move while she simply walked out of sight. As an Ursa received the business end of Talaria, at least half a dozen assorted Grimm stood in front of Emerald, who drew her weapon from their holsters, revealing them to be dual pistols. The Grimm pack learned this the hard way as she opened fire and all but a single Ursa fell to a barrage of laser shots while charging at Emerald. Emerald quickly transformed her pistols into Kopis blades, flipping and slashing at the rampaging Ursa to kill it. As more knights joined the fray, Sway popped up from the giant before running off to find RWBY. Another bullhead arrived at the scene, this time holding Team CFVY and 2 of the teachers at Beacon, Peter Port, and Bartholomew Oobleck. The ship hovered over the air until the group jumped out of the craft and onto the battlefield. As Port and Oobleck go off to another part of the battle, Yatsuhashi gets surrounded by a pack of Grimm. He unlimbers his large sword before smashing it on the ground, unleashing a shockwave that sends them flying. Velvet and Fox proceed to kick and punch the Grimm with Fox impaling a creep. Nearby a large spiked Ursa roars before charging them. Fox intercepts it with a kick then unleashes a combo of slashes and punches with his weapons, knocking the Grimm skyward with an uppercut. As it descends he delivers a blow to the head with both hands that sends it flying. After landing it swells up and explodes, impaling the nearby Grimm with its spikes. Coco walks forward swatting a few away with her weapon. Yatsuhashi shields Velvet before the 2 start advancing. "Nice hustle Fox," Coco said to her teammate as she gave him a light on the butt, "Good job." Coco then approached a large Beowulf who growled at her. The fashionista lowered her sunglasses. "You just destroyed my favorite clothing store," she muttered before spitting, "Prepare to die." She proceeded to swat away the Beowulf's claw before kicking it in its crotch. As it falls to the ground and looks at her, Coco leans down and slams her bag onto its head. She effortlessly swats away 3 more Beowulfs, then leaps back to avoid a Deathstalker's tail. Velvet steps forward, and moves a hand toward her weapon about to open the box. "Hey, come on, you just spent all the semester building that up," Coco said to her partner, "Don't waste it here." Coco then transforms her purse into a giant minigun, and starts firing, slaughtering the advancing horde of Grimm, including a Deathstalker and 3 Nevermores. As she did this, she took notice of the Reds and Blues nearby, fighting alongside teams RWBY and JNPR. "Hey, look who it is," Coco said to her team. "It's Donut." Velvet muttered, "Hey Donut." Donut, who was smashing at creep into oblivion, turned around. "Oh hey guys," Donut shouted, "we have a lot of fashion ideas to talk about later." Meanwhile, Oobleck and Port regrouped at the large hole and found Sway, who happened to be with Sarge. Oobleck knelt down and patted him lightly before turning to Sarge and nodded at him. The red soldier nodded in return before the Triot turned their attention to a large horde of Grimm heading in their direction. They all opened fire on the horde, sending them flying to the ground. Glinda then walked through the streets with a scorn on her face, taking out several smaller Grimm with her wand. She then came face to face with a large Ursa. She held her wand up ready for an attack until Caboose came crashing down on the creature, crushing it to death. Caboose then looked at Glinda. Oh hello. Caboose. Get back to the pavilion. Wash shouted via comms. Let's give these huntsmen a show. Okay. Caboose replied before running back to the rest of his friends. Glinda was about to follow, but was stopped suddenly by Ironwood, who had arrived at the scene. Don't. He said to her, I want to see what these soldiers are capable of. Caboose rejoined his friends at the pavilion. They were all fighting in a circle, similar to how they fought the clones of Tex all those months ago. Tucker flipped in the air and sliced the head of a Borbotusk clean. Carolina narrowly dodged the claw of a large Beowulf before jumping in the air and striking a fatal blow to its back with her stun baton. Locust snuck around several smaller Beowulf until he revealed himself to them. The pack jumped at him but he disappeared before reappearing nearby. In his place where the Beowulfs were standing was a future cube. The grenade went off, teleporting the pack to who knows where. Lopez flew the Prowler over the battlefield and deployed a Warthog from the rest of his team. Sarge, Griff, and Simmons all hopped in their respected seats and drove around the pavilion, running over any unfortunate Grimm that crossed their path. Donut swung his hammer at a Deathstalker's stinger, knocking it away before slamming the weapon onto the creature's head. Where's Kai? Griff shouted from the Warthog. She's on the Prowler with Lopez. Sarge replied as he fired at several Grimm with his shotgun. It's best bet that she stays there, we don't know what that power she got can do to her. Meanwhile, all of Blue Team went up to the giant hole in the road. Time to fill in this hole. Carolina quipped. Bo chicka bow wow. Tucker shouted. Damn it. Carolina groaned, realizing what she just said. I should have seen that coming. Ah, don't worry. Caboose said to her, I didn't see it either. Carolina just rolled her eyes, thanks. Wash then looked at Glinda. Hey lady. You wanna stoop the Grimm? Now's the time. Glinda just looked at them before going up to the hole. She used her semblance to pick up the nearby debris, fixing the hole completely as if there was nothing there in the first place. Later, all the Grimm were eradicated from the city. Ironwood had several AK-200s patrolling the streets to make sure that all citizens were safe. Lopez landed the Prowler in the pavilion and joined the rest of his team, along with Kai. Teams RWBY, JNPR, CVFY, along with Emerald and Mercury were standing together, happy that they won the battle. Amidst the battle that happened, several Atlas soldiers managed to find Torchwick amidst the rubble from the train. They were now taking him to one of their dropships. Oh, I can't believe that you caught me, you've really taught me the error of my ways. He said to the soldiers as one of them grabbed him by the arm. Hey, watch the hat. The Reds and Blues all watched from the boarding ramp of the Prowler, while everyone else was happy that Torchwick was being brought to justice. All except for them. They were angry, not because he was being arrested, but because they knew something bigger was going to happen if they simply arrested him. Tucker looked at Wash, who nodded at him, along with Carolina, Sarge, and soon everyone else. The group walked over to the dropship where Torchwick was being loaded onto. Stop! Tucker shouted at them, catching everyone's attention. Ironwood and Glinda, who happened to be near dropship, looked at them. What? Glinda muttered, more on the offended side of the spectrum. I wanna have a word with Torchwick. Tucker explained. Weiss scoffed at Tucker's disrespect. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Stay out of this, Weiss. Simmons said to her, trust us. Glinda gave Tucker a sneer, we can't simply do that. I'm not asking. Tucker replied as he raised his DMR at her. The Reds and Blues followed suit and aimed their rifles at the Atlesian personnel. What are you doing? Blake asked them. Ironwood, who was perhaps the most interested in the Reds and Blues aside from Ozpin, wanted to see what they would do. So he decided to take a risk. Let them talk. He ordered his men. What? Glinda shouted. Yes, I mean it. Ironwood said to her before looking at the Blood Gulch crew, shall I find a place where you may speak with him in private? No. Tucker replied, we want to speak here, in front of everyone. Right here and now. Ironwood gave him a stone-cold glare before responding, very well. The Reds and Blues lowered their weapons as the two guards allowed Torchwick to walk up to the soldiers. What is it, Mr. Tucker? Torchwick asked him. Tucker put his rifle on his back and took out his pistol and began to inspect it. He started to circle Torchwick as he looked at his sidearm. "I like to say that I agree with everything you said to me on the train." Tucker began, "This world is doomed. The kingdoms think they live in a golden age of prosperity, where all walks of life can live in peace. But me and my men know the full truth, there is no peace. The kingdoms, they live in an illusion that they plan to keep everyone in. Everyone on top, the councils, the bureaucrats, the corrupt business officials up in Atlas, the Schnee Dust Company, the Atlas military. All of them are living in this illusion." Several of the Atlas personnel were slightly taken back by Tucker's words. Even Glinda, who wanted to say something, but Ironwood prevented her from doing so. "So you're right, this world is doomed by outside forces. We intend on stopping them, and saving this world." Tucker continued, "Just like you claim." Torchwick couldn't help but smile at this, but Tucker then turned around. He unloaded his pistol's magazine. "Unfortunately," Tucker said, "you tried to hurt our friends." He put a new magazine into the pistol. "And when you have a specific goal." He turned off the safety. "You have to eliminate the opposition." Tucker then turned back around. Bang! "No!" Glinda shouted. Tucker fired a lone bullet that went through Torchwick's skull. The criminal's body fell to the ground, blood splattered in the process. Several guards along with Ironwood and Glinda ran over to examine Torchwick's body. Tucker remained unfazed at what he just did. "He's dead, sir," one of the soldiers said to Ironwood. The Atlasane general said nothing and continued to look at the body. Glinda, on the other hand, stood up and turned to face Tucker. Her face full of rage. "You," she growled, "you just killed our only piece of information. He could have told us what he was trying to accomplish. Tucker took out his sword and pointed it at Glinda. She was about to reach for her crop, but was stopped by Sarge, who pointed his shotgun at her, not to threaten her, but just to get to stop yelling. "Guns down, Sarge," Tucker muttered to his friend, who looked at him before complying. Tucker deactivated his sword. He then proceeded to take off his helmet. He had light brown skin, spiky black hair, and brown eyes. He appeared to be in his mid-20s. "It's like I said," Tucker addressed the crowd, "this world is doomed. And Torchwick, he was just the beginning." "What are you talking about?" Yang asked him. "Torchwick was part of an even bigger plan," O'Malley explained. "It's true," Doc added, "we have proof." Ironwood stood up and looked at the Sim troopers, explain. Tucker then spoke, "Ever since encountering Torchwick, we realized that not only was he trying to cause chaos, but was simply a pawn in a bigger plot." "What kind of plot?" Ironwood asked them. "A plot to attack Beacon," Tucker answered him. Several murmurs were heard from the crowd of huntsmen and Atlas soldiers. "We did some digging, and found out that Torchwick was part of a group that was working with the White Fang." Tucker continued, "We call this group the Four Horsemen. While knowing the identity of one of them, that being Torchwick, we did not know the identities of the other three, until we came across that hacker the other night while all of you were dancing." Glinda remained unfazed, as she felt like Tucker was simply trying to insult her for not fighting the hacker. Tucker then continued, "The only way for someone to break into the CCT is to be on the campus grounds. Now, all of the Atlesian personnel are out of the question, because they were either dead or unconscious. So that left the Beacon staff and students. But the hacker fought with glass, and her clothes lit up, had black hair and amber eyes. It couldn't have been Blake, 'cause she doesn't fight with glass, or any of the staff, since they don't match her description. So that leaves students. None of the students at Beacon match her description or use glass in combat. So it wasn't a student." Glinda spoke up, "We get it. It could have been anyone." "I'm not finished yet," Tucker continued, "however, there are students visiting from other academies. So we checked their files and transcripts. And what did we find? Cinder, Fall, Simmons answered, forged transcripts, fights with glass, black hair and amber eyes. It's like looking in a mirror." "Whoa whoa whoa," Emerald interjected, "you can't just accuse my teammate as the culprit." Tucker looked at her, "Hey, that's funny, coming from one of Cinder's accomplices." Emerald's eyes widened. What are you talking about? I'm just here with my team to participate in the Vital Festival." "Simmons," Tucker said to his friend, "show them all the recording." Simmons walked up and displayed a hologram of Torchwick, Standing next to him was Adam Taurus and Neo. But the other three were none other than Emerald, Mercury, and Cinder Fall. This information is surprising to say the least. Cinder said in the recording, but we must be cautious. They aren't a threat, not a pressing one at least. What? Adam questioned. Why? They will play their cards carefully. Cinder explained, and when they do, we will crush them. Several loud gasps and murmurs came from the crowd at the sudden revelation, including both Team RWBY and Team JNPR. Behold, your other three horsemen, Tucker announced. Apparently, these assholes wanted to attack Beacon. Carolina spoke up. The plan of bringing Grimm into the city was to be used to convince Vale's government to appoint Atlas as head of security. Once on board the flagship, Torchwick was going to activate a virus that would infect the entire database. How can you be sure? Ironwood asked, quite surprised at how something this big was right under his nose. Don't believe us. Sarge spoke up, check the bastard's scroll. Ironwood went back over to Torchwick's body. He removed his scroll from his pocket and began going through its files. To his surprise and horror, there was a file that matched what the Reds and Blues were talking about. They're right, Ironwood muttered. Look. He showed the file to Glinda, who was just as surprised. Wash then gazed at Mercury and Emerald, who were in a state of fear and trauma. Well, he said to them, what do you have to say for yourself? Mercury couldn't help but curl his hands into fits in anger, while Emerald was still in shock. Is this true? RWBY asked her. You were part of this. Emerald still didn't say a word. HMPH, I thought so. Sarge muttered. Traitors. Griff shouted. You guys suck. Kai added. Man, you guys are speechless. Tucker said to them, I mean, we have that effect on a lot of people. But Cinder, oh boy, she is not gonna be happy that you failed her. Am I right, Cinder? Sure enough, Tucker looked beyond the crowd. Cinder was standing in there. Her face was full of rage. You ruined everything. Cinder snarled at the Sim troopers. Uh-oh, looks like somebody's about to throw a tantrum. Sarge taunted at her. Oh, and Cinder. Tucker said to her, just to let you know. That little power you had, let's just say Kai here will be taking great care of it for the time being. Cinder's eyes widened. No. Power. Ironwood questioned, what power? Oh, you want it? Caboose asked Cinder in a childish manner. Well, why do you come here, and we'll give it to you. Caboose. Simmons groaned. The phrase is, why don't come and get it? Oh right. Caboose muttered. What Simmons said. Quadruple ARRRRRRGGGGGAAAAAHHHH. Cinder screamed, as she charged at the Reds and Blues with her two swords already in her hands. Kai. Tucker shouted, show her who's boss. Kai jumped in Cinder line of sight and somehow blocked her by summoning some sort of fiery orange shield. She then pushed Cinder away from her and Tucker. What? Cinder cried. Kai's visor suddenly gave off a fiery glow, with flames emitting from it. She then made the shield disappear before manifesting two glowing swords. You don't deserve that power. Cinder screamed as she charged at Kai. The yellow soldier deflected each of her attacks before managing to disarm Cinder of her weapons. Ironwood's reaction to witnessing Kai's powers was surprising to him. The maiden, she's the maiden, he muttered. But she got the powers after they attacked Cinder. Glinda said to him, just as surprised, that means Cinder is responsible for Autumn's condition. Cinder got up, now flanked by Emerald and Mercury, who had their weapons out in defense. This isn't over. Cinder sneered at them. We'll see. Locus answered her, before Caboose ran up and tried to attack her. But she, and her associates shattered into glass. They then all looked up in the sky to see an Valine airship flying away. With Cinder, Mercury, Emerald, and Neo on board. The bullhead then flew away. Damn it. Griff groaned, why do we keep forgetting Abu Neo? Should we go after them? Donut suggested. Nah. Sarge replied, they've had their asses handed to them enough for today. Besides with the revelations we told these idiots. We've halted their plans for quite a while. That was her. Caboose muttered, from my dream, it was Cinder. You sure? Tucker asked. Yeah, I am. Caboose replied. The group then noticed Ironwood storming up to them. Oh great, what does he want? Doc groaned. Nothing good. O'Malley said to his ego. Ironwood walked up to them, a mixture of surprise and anger on his face. "How did you do that?" he demanded. "Did what?" Griff asked in a rude tone. "You just stopped a terrorist plot in less than a month," he shouted, "something that not even my own military could do." "Well," Sarge chuckled, "there's only one good explanation for you, dirtbag. We are better than you." "Yeah," Griff shouted. "Suck it, Atlas," Simmons added. Ironwood of course growled before trying to speak, but Glinda beat him to it. "We don't support vigilantism," she scowled. "Because of your actions the White Fang have been tightening their grip on all their holdings in the Four Kingdoms." "Oh, I'm sorry," Tucker mockingly quipped. "Are you jealous that we're doing your job of being heroes?" Glinda sneered. "I did not say that." "Oof, I don't know." Griff sarcastically commented. "I definitely sounded like." All right, enough." Wash interjected. "Listen lady. We came here to see our friends. We know that whatever power Kai absorbed came from Beacon. We want answers, about the power, Cinder, the White Fang, and whoever is truly behind this." Glinda looked at Ironwood before speaking. "If it's answers you want, then it's answers you'll get." And this is the end of part 7 of this What If. Do not forget to leave a comment down below, subscribe to this channel.